Welcome to Belle Plantation. This manor house is where Isaac Height Jr. and his family lived starting in 1797. Also living on the plantation were 276 enslaved men, women, and children who he owned. This tour is given from the perspective of Isaac Height's wife, Anne. Particular focus has been placed on the experience of African Americans at Belle Grove, providing a glimpse of what their lives were like here. In Anne's letters, she refers to the enslaved workers as servants, or hands, not slaves. What does this tell you about how slavery was thought about during this time period?
I am Anne Tunstall Maury, and I came here to live here at Belle Grove when I married Major Isaac Height Jr. in 1802. We lived here together until he passed in 1836. I've carried on managing the plantation since then with the help of our good sons. I love the view out the front door on the entryway of the house. It is a beautiful view of the mountains. Sometimes, looking out past the Blue Ridge Mountains in the distance, I miss my home in Orange, Virginia. But Belle Grove became my home, and it will be for the rest of my life. I wonder what the servants and the hands see when they look through these doors. Did they see a different world? Did they see a different world than we do? Do they dream of leaving here for freedom, or do they dread being anywhere else than home here with us at Belle Grove? While the men would be out in the fields, I can still see the women trying to get tasks done while carrying a baby in their other arm. Isaac was so proud of his library. He was well educated, and the library speaks to that. He had 444 books on adjustable bookshelves. Two objects in the room made me remember Isaac fondly. One is the secretary bookshelf filled with all of his books, and the other is the library table where I can see him sitting with his friends talking about the politics of the days into the night. At the secretary bookshelf, I can remember Isaac reading up on the latest advances in farming. It was our primary occupation here at the plantation. I can also see our servants who worked on cleaning the room. They would try to sound out the titles on the spines of the books. Well, I was never one for teaching the servants. A few new figures, and the blacksmith would use slates and pencils to tally their work for Isaac. We always thought education was important. In Isaac's will, he gave explicit instruction for the education of his children. He wrote that my boys, after receiving a classical education, are to be sent at least 2 years to the University of Virginia. Near the front of the house, the sitting room was where I entertained my guests and family who came to visit. The high ceiling allowed a lot of light in and really nice air circulation on those hot summer days. But I'm so glad that Isaac took Mr. Jefferson's advice to install door hinges that help the doors close more easily. The winter draughts down the halls can be dreadful, and how lovely it is when the sunlight from the house beams into the cheerful room during the winter months. The children would often play in the room, sometimes even with the servants' children when they weren't working too. I often summon a servant here to instruct them on how a fine dinner was to be planned, or to tell them the task to be accomplished. The west hallway led to the plantation office, the dining room, and the kitchen. Isaac made the day-to-day decision here in the plantation office. By 1802, Isaac controlled 7,500 acres of land, which he kept detailed records of all the plantation business. He also owned a general store, a gristmill, a sawmill, and a distillery. All the decisions were made here for those businesses here in this office. Isaac was careful to keep a list of servants and hands he owned, and if they died, gave birth, ran away, or were ill. I can vividly remember him sitting behind his desk for hours on end and recording the daily activities of the farm, what was planted and harvested, and how much the crops were sold for at the market. If you look at the window to the west, you can see down to the servant cabins from here. On occasion, the overseer, or hand, like the blacksmith Daniel, would come to the office to give an update on certain tasks, such as shoeing the horses. If Isaac had a business associate visit, the voices coming from this room could be very loud. My husband wasn't afraid to argue to make the best deals. The kitchen was the centerpiece of our house. Many servants worked here to prepare our meals and preserve food for the winter months. At just about all times, someone would be baking, someone would be cooking, and others would be preparing the food to be brought upstairs. I remember all the activities that would happen in the basement that could probably use a little more light, when there was a particularly fancy meal to prepare. If I was up in the parlor and listened very carefully, I used to hear the servants downstairs talking about the events at the plantation. They would worry about if we'd sell them and what kind of life they would have somewhere else. Of course, we treated them well and they wouldn't want to be owned by anyone else. They often remembered Judah the cook, one of the heads of their family. She passed away in early 1836, the same year as my dear Isaac. The servants stay in their own quarters, but if the family has a need, I might have one bed down here for the night. Along with the parlor, Isaac and I made sure the dining room projected our importance and status to our guests that came to the plantation. We endeavored to provide every luxury. I am proud of our ice house on the property, just outside the house and 18 feet into the ground. When the pond or creek would freeze over during the winter, the servants would go to cut the ice and bring it up to the ice house. With enough straw or sawdust around it, that ice house kept the ice until well into the summer. On the hottest summer days, I'd instruct the servants to put a glass chiller at every place so that the guests could rest their wine glass in cool water, and so the fine wine Isaac had served would be its best. Of course, in the winter, we had to keep the food warm, and the kitchen was downstairs. Often, a pot or two was kept on the dining room hearth to stay warm. You can see it has worn away after all of these years. The parlor is where Isaac and I would welcome our most esteemed guest. The room was always filled with beautiful furnishings, moldings, and paintings. It really was very elegant, but stayed cool in the summer with breezes coming in from the south from the large doors. How I remember the lively conversations that took place here with Isaac discussing business opportunities, politics, and trade with many fine gentlemen. Often this included talking about buying and selling the servants. I also remember the many happy family gatherings here, including my own dear daughter's weddings. How proud I am of them and the respectable men they married. Of course, the servants did not come into this room unless they were directed to, or had some sort of duty to perform for us. For me, the hallway represented a crossroads for all the activities that went on in the house. I can remember both family members and servants walking in and out of the room, and my precious children taking their first steps down these halls. The east hallway led to the bedrooms of the house. The nursery sat on the south side where the sunlight could help keep the children warm in the winter months. The master bedroom, or gold chamber, was on the north side of the hallway. Outside of the nursery, a servant woman might put up a pallet in the hall to be available at all hours to help care for the children. Isaac and I had 10 children, so there was a newborn child in the house almost every other year from 1805 until 1819. The nursery is where I or the servants would care for the children. With 10 of them, and all of their different ages, there was always a lot to be done. Of course, this room filled up fast. That's why Isaac had wings in the west added into the house with more bedrooms. Here there was a chamber pot for the children to use, so they didn't have to go outside. The servants emptied it, cleaned the pots, and the outside privies that the rest of the family used as well. The room overlooks the plantation where we can see many of the men outside working in the fields. The master bedroom was also known as the gold chamber. Isaac actually had 2 wives in his life. The first was Nellie Conway Madison, the sister of President James Madison. They had 3 children, but dear James died at just 3 years old. At least they were blessed with 2 more children, and they are fine people indeed. I married Isaac after Nellie passed away in 1802. Isaac and I had 10 children. The children stayed in the nursery that was right across the hall. You might have noticed this interesting cabinet. kept some of our finest spices like cinnamon, black pepper, and nutmeg in the cabinet. They are very dear, and it is better that I dispense them to the cooks to make sure that they aren't wasted, and so I instruct how they should be used.